mental health that took place during and because of the lockdown. Our children haven't been focused on enough, and they've suffered a lot more than the adults have. So during a time of depression, like for adults, it takes like a month before we get depressed. Something has to build up a calamity in your life. It's not instantaneous, but with children, it's actually instantaneous. As soon as they told our kids, you're not going back to school, and we don't know when that's going to change, within 2 weeks, suicide ideation took place and depression took place. During the lockdown, child eating disorders increased by 90%. So I'm going to read you a couple statistics from my manual here. So just so you know, this is called Deaths of Despair, a child suicide evidence package. I'm going to hand out a few hundred copies afterwards. I sent a physical copy to every member of Parliament and every MLA in Canada, along with every trustee and every superintendent in Ontario. At the end of that, I got one email response from one MP acknowledging receipt of this. So then I sent out an email version with a letter saying your name has been added to a list on our website, takeactioncanada.ca, to let parents know that you are in receipt of this child suicide evidence package, so you have to acknowledge it. Again, I got one email response from the whole country. So next week, we're going to put them all on a notice of liability, letting them know that they have to acknowledge what's happened to our kids. So, in the 5 years before COVID, an average of 25 children aged 1 to 19 died every year from influenza. So statistically, children are more than twice as likely to die from influenza than they are to die from COVID. And yet we tolerate influenza every year without any special, let alone world-altering precautions. During a 4-month period of the lockdown, more than 5 times as many children attempted suicide and were treated at Hamilton McMaster Children's Hospital compared to how many children died with COVID, with or of, we don't sure, in the entire province of Ontario since the start of the pandemic. There were other statistics from the UK showing a child is 5 times more likely to kill himself during lockdown than he is to be hospitalized with COVID. Arizona reported a 67% increase in child suicide during the 2020 lockdown. According to a peer-reviewed study by the American Academy of Pediatrics, a Texas hospital reported child suicide attempts were 2.34 times higher in March 2020 compared to the same month from the previous year, proving once again that suicide ideation was immediate. As soon as we started the lockdown, the children got depressed immediately. The Canadian Kids Help phone line received over 4 million calls in 2020, which is more than double the 1.9 million calls they received in 2019. Even the CDC reported a 24% increase in emergency mental health room visits with children between the ages of 5 and 11. In Sweden, and this is how we know none of this was necessary, in Sweden, they kept over 1.9 million children in school full-time, they had no lockdown in their society, and they had 0 child deaths as a result of COVID. So the biological reason has been given why children are at virtually 0 risk of serious infection or death with COVID or spreading COVID, and that's because they have so very few ACE2 receptors. This is the receptor how the virus would bind to us as adults. Well, children have hardly any, and the younger they go, eventually they have none. So they weren't even at risk of this in the first place. So during the Delta phase of the pandemic, there were 84 studies conducted around the world showing that no child under the age of 10 has ever passed COVID upward to an adult in any country around the world. And yet we locked them out, took them out of their schools, their sports, their arts, their dance, their activities, all the things that made them happy, away from their peers, away from the teachers that are a fail-safe. If a child comes from an abusive family, the teacher would normally notice this and report it. All of that was taken away. And finally, the online education failed miserably. Even according to the government's own statistics, their education, the mental health and prosperity was destroyed for nothing because school boards, looking at student midterm marks during lockdown and the online education, found a 16% failure rate, which is double the failure rate from the previous year. So more than twice as many kids failed, eating disorders up 90%, 5 times as many children tried to kill themselves. It was just unprecedented. And what did our government say about this? The government waited 6 months before they reported the suicide statistics from that year. Normally, 6 months longer than they normally do. And in the end, they lied and said that suicide is down during lockdown amongst all age groups. But we have the evidence that it most certainly was not. So I'm going to hand out a few hundred copies, and I ask if you agree with the sentiment of the study. After you read it, please mail it to a local member of parliament, a city council, or any decision maker you think would benefit from this, because we're going to be dealing with the fallout of our children's mental health for the next decade, if not 20 years. It's already too late. We already have to help them. So I hope I can count on you. And if you want to read this, takeactioncanada.ca. Thank you.